You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts Sonika Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in here. Today I am going to be talking about a dilemma that faces a lot of people in relationship. And it is a dilemma that is very difficult to be in if you're the one going through it, or if your partner is the one going through it or initiating it, it is probably also really difficult for you. This is a dilemma or a situation that you can experience if you've been married for 20 or 30 years, or as witnessed by the clients we've had this week, we've had both couples that have been married for 20 plus years with this particular dilemma. And we've also talked to people who have been in a relationship with someone for 3 months and they are still finding themselves in the same dilemma. And the dilemma is this. You find yourself in a relationship or a marriage that is not going how you want it to be, going, that is not turning out the way you want it to turn out, inside of which you don't feel as good or as happy as you want to feel. And you ask yourself, is this the right relationship for me? Would I be better off if I broke it up, if we divorced and I tried my luck on my own or finding someone else? Would that be better for me, or would it be better for me if we stuck together, including all the other people that might be involved in a decision like that? And you try to think it through. And if you're a married person with children, you're thinking about, what would be best for our children and our family as well. But the bottom line is the dilemma, what it really boils down to is like that good old song, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay here or should I go somewhere else? In this podcast, I'm going to offer some general guidelines and some insights and background that hopefully can be useful if you are going through this dilemma, and will help ease your mind and give you different ways to think about it and to act about it. And I also want to say there are lots of aspects of this dilemma, this situation, that I will not be covering or even trying to cover on this podcast, because it's much too big of a topic for a podcast episode. But for any given person or couple who came to us, there are all manner of conflict resolution tools and communication techniques and intimacy and trust building exercises that we might guide such a person or such a couple through, and that we do guide them through in our coaching and in our workshops that just are, take more time than we have here. Now, what is it that happens in your relationship or your marriage that would have you be the person to say, should I stay or should I go? Well, it's a little different whether you are someone who's been married for a long time to the same person, or whether you're someone who's in a brand new relationship that you still aren't sure about. So I'll talk about it first from the point of view of long-term couples, long-term marriages. Sometimes it's an isolated incident that brings you to this dilemma, that brings you to be thinking, wow, should I really be in this marriage? Like, you just discovered your spouse had an affair for 2 years, or has a double life, or stole a bunch of your money, or, has some big secret, or, an incident like that. But more often, it's a gradual thing. Often, it's actually so gradual that you yourself might not even be able to pinpoint exactly when something happened or what happened, if even there was any particular thing that happened at all. Like a woman we had in our office this week who was presenting this story of they have a couple of children. They've been married for, I think, 17 or 18 years. And she will say things like, which is very common, what we hear from one or both spouses is, well, we really love each other. We're doing well taking care of the children, and we're great partners, and we work well together. ... We're just not really in love anymore. I'm not feeling it. I just don't love him like that anymore. I miss, misses something. And another man who came to our office from entirely separate, nothing to do with the woman I just mentioned, told us an essentially identical story about him and his wife. He said, by the way, they had also been married for almost 20 years, also have a few children, 2 to be exact. And he said, well, we're great. My wife and I were great partners. We love each other so much. We work together really well. We're on the same page about how to be with our kids and where to put them to school, and we're a great team. But dot dot dot. That's me inserting the dot dot dots. The sex, she doesn't want to have as much sex as I do, and it's really important to me. I don't know if I can keep living without as much sex as I want. So yeah, should I stay or should I go? Now, this dilemma shows up a little bit differently if you're in a brand new or newer relationship, as illustrated by another example we had this week. A man was telling me, well, I've been together with this woman for 3 or 4 months, and I really like her. We're pretty good together. But then, last week she got really mad at me about something I didn't even really think was a big deal, and now I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to be in a relationship like that. I don't know if I want to be with someone like that. I don't know if I wouldn't be better off just, calling it, taking my loss right now and getting out of it and just, looking for someone who's a better match for me. And that is a very common story we hear for anybody who's in a newer relationship, anywhere between 1 day and say 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and where, actually up to a year or two, really, where you're still getting to know each other and getting to know how you operate and how you operate under pressure. And you're still getting to find out how you and your partner react when things get hard, when when you don't show up from your best side. And in those situations, it's very easy to take every imaginable breakdown and have that be the reason to ask the question, should I stay or should I go? When you don't yet have a formal commitment and you don't yet have children or houses or cars or communities built together, the consequences for splitting up, aren't so big. It's easier to pull off logistically and emotionally sometimes. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you shouldn't be doing that, by the way. Every one of the great things about the time we live in is that you have such amazing freedom to decide who you want to be in relationship with or don't want to be in relationship with, and how long you want to be in relationship with someone. If you should stay or you should go, it's entirely up to you, especially if it's a newer relationship. And it remains true that the dilemma shows up so much. And for the man I just mentioned, as one example, it's not a fun place to be, because it gives rise to like a barrage of questions that is banging around in your head, all of which tends to unground you. It's very hard to feel grounded in yourself, centered, and to make a decision that comes from a good heart, a decision that you can feel aligned with, both in your mind and in your heart, both logically and emotionally. And if you've ever been in this situation, or if you've had friends who are in this situation, you'll recognize the kinds of questions that tend to bang around in your head. Should I stay or should I go? Should we split up? Am I wasting my time here? Would my energy be better spent if I just cut my losses now? Went through the grief of it, but then I could rebuild. Are we ever going to be able to rekindle our sex and our passion? Am I even in love with him anymore? Does she even like me that way anymore? It shouldn't be this hard. Is something wrong with me? Is something wrong with him or her? Is something wrong with our relationship? And if it's this difficult, it must be wrong, right? And then, of course, with all those questions, every one of those questions produces uncertainty and anxiety. You can just imagine that. Even if you're not in that situation right now, you could just imagine being in this situation where you're thinking, is this the right marriage for me? Should I be staying here? And you can probably feel in your body what kind of nervousness and anxiety easily gets produced by this kind of question. So it's no wonder that we are typically very, very eager to answer the questions, so that we can get rid of the anxiety, so that we can feel at ease, so that we can move forward, hopefully in a good way for us, right? But the thing that makes this tricky is, really, when you think about it, when you find yourself in this situation, which very often is it's this gradual disappearance of a certain wonderful feeling. Like the couples I mentioned who have been married for almost 20 years, it used to be that it was sexy and wonderful and hot and they were best friends. And now 17, 18 years later, they find themselves missing this feeling, this elusive feeling that goes by many names: chemistry, in love, passion, zest, aliveness, sexiness. It goes by many names, but it points to the same feeling. And somehow you miss this feeling. So you try to think your way out of it. This is one of the biggest things that actually makes this dilemma even more difficult to deal with. Is here I am. I notice I'm not having the feeling I want. I want to feel in love and passionate and alive and attracted to you and hot for you, and I'm not. So I try to think my way to the proper action to take that's going to get me out of it. You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonika Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. But when I am thinking about it, trying to entertain all these difficult questions in my mind, it has the side effect of taking me out of relationship. It's as if you were looking at a couple, maybe it's yourself or you can pretend it's someone else, but if you could look at a couple from up above and study them, you could see, if let's say you were looking at the person, let's say it was you, who had that dilemma and you were thinking these thoughts about, should I stay or should I go? And then you try to think about what the right answer is. It's as if you were watching from above, you could watch yourself take a few steps away from your partner. This is the effect it has in relationship. It removes you from the emotional parts of the relationship while you try to think your way out of the dilemma back to a good feeling. Now, I want to introduce an idea that is really important in relationship that almost no one is aware of, and which I have heard most eloquently described by Esther Perel recently. If you're interested, you just go Google Esther Perel. Maybe you can Google Rethinking Infidelity. So Esther Perel has talked a lot about this in her books and TED Talks and on her podcast, and it's really important. She says we have two basic human needs that are conflicting. You can think of them as opposite ends of a spectrum. And those two needs we have are, on the one end of the spectrum, intimacy, and on the other end of the spectrum, it's passion. Those two don't go together. As a matter of fact, they work against each other, but we have an equal need for both, although in different measures at different times. When you think about intimacy on one end of the spectrum, what goes with intimacy is trust, familiarity, routine, safety, feeling home, feeling like you have a nest, getting close to each other, knowing everything about each other, having no secrets. Those are aspects of intimacy. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the passion end of the spectrum, we have qualities and experiences like passion, zest, adventure, mystery, a little bit of fear, unknownness, things that are unknown and new and dangerous and risky. That's what builds passion. You might remember for things in the beginning of your relationship when you were head over heels in love. There was a lot of, as is true for most new relationships, there's a whole lot of passion, but very little intimacy because it's all brand new. And the newness in and of itself creates aliveness and zest and danger, which is a great aphrodisiac. It makes us want each other, and our sex is typically easily flowing and abundant and great in those times. So in a brand new relationship, there's often lots and lots of passion and very little intimacy because we don't know each other so well yet. We haven't had time to build trust and familiarity. And the longer you are with someone, and just think about your own relationship, is an easy thing to recognize for most people. Whereas in the very beginning, lots and lots of passion, not so much trust, because there was a lot of scary aspects of the unknown nature of it in the beginning. But as you know each other more and more, intimacy and trust builds. so that after a year or 2 or 10 or 20, you are very intimate with each other. It's like, hanging out with your spouse is like hanging out with your best friend. You can talk about everything. You don't care what you wear. You can burp and fart and pick your nose, and it's okay because you feel totally safe to be yourself. And both those ends of this spectrum, intimacy and passion, are both wonderful, amazing, desired, needed experiences. And one tends to work against each other, so that you can think about, a classic example is if you've been married for 20 years and, like I mentioned, you're so comfortable you can burp and fart and wear your dirty sweatpants together and it's totally fine and you don't have to do your hair. That doesn't necessarily do anything for your sexiness and your passion and your magnetic attraction. Whereas on the other hand, if you've ever been in a relationship that kept being high on passion but low on intimacy, that's the kind of relationship where you never feel quite safe, where you can't quite relax, where you're not really sure your partner has your back, you can't quite trust. If you're in one of those relationships, you long for more intimacy. If you're in one of those marriages where you've been together for 20 years and you're the best friends and you're more like roommates, you might very well find yourself longing for more for more passion and zest and aliveness and hot sex. And that is very commonly what brings someone to us, or brings someone to be asking this question: should I stay or should I go? I don't know if I can be in this relationship anymore because I so miss the passion portion. It is a very easy conclusion to jump to, that if I don't feel this passion and this zest and aliveness and sexiness here, I gotta go find it with someone else. Because if if I'm in a 20-year marriage and I begin to look for someone else, or sometimes it turns into actual affairs or maybe just emotional affairs, that by itself creates excitement, because it's illegal and dangerous and risky and all those things that go to build passion. But the thing is that we often don't think about is, even if I were to go outside my marriage or to get divorced and conclude that I'd be better off and have more aliveness if I went somewhere else, is that I am exchanging one set of fulfilled needs for the opposite set of fulfilled needs, but in both situations, I'm leaving the other set of needs unfulfilled. Great example to illustrate that. Sonika was talking to a woman a while back who said, my husband is the most amazing father. He's the sweetest friend. He's a wonderful provider. He's a role model for our children. He's so good to me and has always been so good to me and totally had my back. But the sex is really boring now, and we just don't have that kind of passion anymore. So I am going to go find someone else. I'm going to go get divorced and I'm going to go find that quality. And she may or may not be able to find that quality, but even if she goes to find that quality, find someone else to fall in love with and have a hot honeymoon, now she is without all the needs for intimacy, all the familiarity and friendship and community and safety that comes with the family and community they had built up till then are now gone, potentially completely gone, depending on how a divorce plays out, of course. So in either case, there's something new to create. But the thing is, the passion side is very alluring. Like the thing that has you or someone else say, I really love my partner, but we're not in love, is because that feeling of in love, oh man, it's so good. It's so juicy. It's so rich. It makes me feel so alive. It impacts how I look at everything. And it's as if it just makes everything glow and better. And most of us don't really know how to create that kind of aliveness with a person we've already been married to for 20 years. And most of the time, it's entirely possible to do that. And that's not to make a recommendation that you should either stay or go. We just think that if you do end up choosing to leave what is otherwise a pretty good and well-functioning marriage or relationship. For one, it definitely be useful if you do it with your eyes wide open and you have all the information. And it also be really useful if you first had given it the best shot to create what you do want where you are now. We just think that it's a lot easier. Like Sonika was saying, the lady I just mentioned before, she was saying to her, you might find it easier to create hot sex with your current husband than it is to create friendship, good fatherhood, role modeling, providing for each other, trusting each other with someone brand new. And perhaps the biggest factor here we want to make you aware of is that as soon as you get preoccupied, whether you have good reason to or not, I'm not suggesting you don't have good reason to it or what you want isn't totally valid, because I'm perfectly sure it is. But once you begin to question your own commitment, and once you begin to question the longevity of your relationship and whether you want to be in it, you take yourself a little bit out of the relationship. You are now no longer completely committed. And it's very easy to, when you find yourself being the one to question it, it looks as if your partner becomes less available or less sexy or further away from you, where in reality, often it was your own questioning that took you out a little. Because once you are questioning it, then everything all of a sudden gets interpreted through the light of, is this a good relationship? Is this marriage going to last? So that every little breakdown or every time your mate does something that's not pleasing to you, it re-stimulates that doubt that says, oh yeah, see, well, maybe we aren't that great for each other. Maybe I really would be happier somewhere else. Which incidentally is what happens in a brand new relationship too, is that every breakdown or every action on your partner's behalf that isn't pleasing to you becomes a reason to question the entire relationship. So there is something else we'd encourage you to try and to try on, is kind of the opposite way actually, is to go into the fire more. Is to step yourself back into relationship full bore. Like put both your feet back in and ask yourself a question such as, if I were completely committed, what would I do? You can even ask yourself to make it more real. I know it's an exaggerated question, but it really works sometimes to open up new possibilities and new ways for yourself to act and feel. Is you ask yourself, what if I didn't even have the option to go anywhere else? If we were stuck with each other, that's one way to say it. You could also say, if I knew for a fact that my partner was the one for me and we didn't even have an option to go anywhere else, what would I do? What would I do? How would I act? What would I say? And how would I present myself to him or to her if I knew he or she was the one? Asking that question will often put you in a different state. And all of a sudden you're forced to work it. I said the same thing to a man that called me last week, that is the example I gave, who said, we've been together for 3 or 4 months and, we're doing really well. We're having a really good time together. I really like her. But then there was this, last week, she blew up at me I didn't think it was a very good reason. And now I'm questioning if I can, should I just cut it now? Or I don't know if I can be in a relationship with someone like that. And my advice to him was, well, how about you treat it like just another breakdown and work it? As I have heard you yourself say, you want to be in a relationship where you also can trust each other, where you can make mistakes and it can be okay, where you can work out conflicts that show up, where you can be forgiven or at least process or get to talk about things you did that weren't so cool. You want that too, right? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Unequivocally, I want that kind of relationship. So I'm like, well, maybe you could use this as a test case. Cool. You have a breakdown, work it. You have a conflict, work it. You have a thing that happened that you didn't want to have happen. Great. How do you use that material to go for what you do want? Which is, very much part of our philosophy in the kind of relationship work that we offer, is We use everything that shows up. We use every breakdown, every hiccup, every subpar experience can be used for the purpose of creating what I do want. And that way we just spend a lot less time in breakdown. When you take it on like this, and I sometimes recommend people if they're very unsure of where to go, I sometimes recommend people in coaching to take it on as a week-long experiment. Take it on as a week-long experiment that you are recommitting 110%. You are back in with both your feet and you can't go anywhere and you are the one for one another. Cool, just take it on as an experiment. How would you show up? What would you do? When you do that, you close all the, you could say, all the emotional or energetic or attentional leaks that are present. When you find yourself in a situation where you're questioning the entire relationship and you have a lot of attention on that one piece, say it's passion or hot sex, that isn't working the way you want it to be, you now have a significant energy leak in your relationship. And by re-stepping in, by putting yourself in both feet, you close the leaks. And we actually find that that is the best way to find the clarity you seek. Now, by doing that, we couldn't tell you up front whether you're going to conclude that you should, yes, definitely stay and work it and recommit, or you're going to conclude, we really would be better off if we split up and go make a new chapter for ourselves. We don't know that. We don't know your situation well enough, and it's impossible to say from afar what is the best solution for any given person. However, what we do know, and I think that's the biggest thing I want to share with this whole podcast, is when you get caught up in the questioning and all these questions that runs in your mind about where should I stay or should I go? Are we it for each other? Do I really want a relationship like that? Are we ever going to make it work again? And yada, yada, yada. You remove yourself from the relationship, and from that place, it's a lot more difficult to find and create the kind of feeling that you actually are missing. When you put yourself back in and you recommit, even if it's just for an experimental time-limited period of a week or two or a month or whatever, once you are in there full blast, for one, you have the optimal shot at working whatever conflicts you have and of recreating the zest and the hotness and the passion or the intimacy or whatever it was you were missing. You have the best shot of recreating that. And as a third benefit of doing that is you are able to make better decisions from that place. Because as you might relate to if you've been in that situation, when you are in this headspace of all these doubtful questions banging around in your head and you feel anxious, it's hard to make a grounded, informed, feel-good decision you can get behind from that state. But if you put yourself back in all the way, open your heart back up, even if some of it is difficult, open yourself up again. From that space, you are much more likely to make a grounded and sound and lasting and good feeling decision that you can get behind. And the final thing I'll share here today, amongst all this food for thought, is Sonika and I, we have kind of a rule of thumb about how to answer this question about am I done or am I not done? Should I stay or should I go? Or should we split up or shouldn't we? And our rule of thumb is, if it's still a question in your mind, if all these questions are still banging around in there, then you're not done yet. And we say that from the point of view of, if you just keep going, if you keep taking the best actions you can take, and that's why I was suggesting the experiment of jumping back in, and then, you do get the relationship support you need, of course, and, take workshops or coaching or talk to trusted friends, of course, get the support you need. But when you do that, the answer will present itself as to whether you are recommitting or whether you're leaving. It will simply become clear one day, if that is the case, that, wow, I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We're it, man. We're making this work. Or it will become clear that, yeah, it's time to go. When you know it's time to go is when you find yourself reaching for the suitcase, or when you find yourself saying, it's time for me to look for another place. Or when you find yourself saying, thank you so much, I love you, and I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. As long as it's a question that bangs around in your head, you're probably not complete. So just work it and trust that the clarity will emerge as you work it. That has for us, through our many years of working relationships and love and intimacy, that has proven to be the best rule of thumb in this particular situation. So that is all I'll offer for today. I hope this was useful for you if you are in this situation, or your partner is in this situation, or friends of yours are in the situation of thinking, should I stay or should I go? We wish you all the best with it. Please feel free to reach out. And another thing I'll say is we have a final thing here. We have a lot of both individuals and couples that come to our Give Yourself to Love workshop. That is the first introduction workshop, weekend workshop we offer. And we have a lot of people come with that as their main thing. And it really helps them to recommit. And, there are people who will use the skills they learn to create a great breakup. But more often than not, you will reconnect because you will be getting the tools and the space to create the exact feeling you have been missing. So feel free to go check that out on our website. If you go to loveworksforyou.com, you'll find the big picture right there on the front page that leads to our Give Yourself to Love workshop. We'd love to see you one of these days. And hey, if we can be of any more support, don't hesitate to give us a buzz or send an email to us. You can find all that through our website, loveworksforyou.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. We wish you all the best. And till next time, take care. You have been listening to the Dare to Love podcast with Sonika Tinker and Christian Peterson, co-founders of LoveWorks. And hey, if you found this podcast to be valuable, would you hit the share button and go ahead and share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever your favorite hangouts are. Thanks so much for sharing the love.